Destiny 2 has its problems and fans certainly have their complaints. And no complaint has been more loud and repeated since day one than the game feels more like Destiny 1.5 than a true sequel. And now maybe we know why that might be.
Back in May of 2016, long before Destiny 2 ever arrived on the shelves, respected games journalist Jason Schreier wrote these words at the bottom of a Kotaku article about a leaked poster for Destiny 1 DLC. From what we hear, he wrote, Destiny 2 was recently rebooted, with Taken King director Luke Smith taking the reins of that project in the wake of a Bungie staff reorganisation. Well, Schreier, being the old news hound that he is, recently went into more detail on that juicy topic in New Year's appearance on the Destiny Tracker podcast. He explained how the game's development was rebooted and how the controversial Eververse microtransaction store was introduced to the game. Back in November of 2014, Activision head Eric Hirschberg said development had already started on Destiny 2.
But Schreier says the development period for the game that we actually got in September last year was much shorter. Quote, I think that it was made in a relatively short period of time. There was a big reboot of Destiny 2 at some point in early 2016. There had been a previous guy who was directing the game before Luke Smith, who's the current director, took over. So that guy was kind of put aside. He's not at Bungie anymore, and Luke Smith took over. Now Schreier seems to think this took place at some point in April of 2016, but he said, don't hold me to that exactly. He went on, quote, so if you think about it that way, they didn't really have a ton of time to work on this game. It had been a 16-month period between the reboot and when the game actually shipped.
According to Schreier, Bungie felt the move to cut planets from the original game and keep up a content cycle on the level of the original was too difficult. Schreier said, quote, what Bungie decided was, we can't do this anymore. This is just too much. This is too hard for us to do. The tools that we work with are already hard to deal with. It's hard for us to make this much content. It's just hard making content in general. Giving up on life there, apparently.
that is games development. I mean, I don't do it, so I can't really say anything, but
it's hard.
That is their entire job. So.
Schreier says Bungie's plan was to drip feed smaller bits of content, and in perhaps the biggest revelation of all, they themselves decided to create the Eververse store and said, quote, make money that way. It wasn't Activision's idea. It was the developer that came up with the microtransaction storefront, and it was Activision that gave it the okay. That's something that runs completely contrary to popular belief, which got them to a point where they didn't need to put out so much content. Quote, and now they're back to the same pattern where they have to crank out these DLCs and just be making content constantly.
So yeah, that's probably going to be a bit of a surprise to you if you haven't already seen the news. It was Bungie that came up with the idea for the Eververse, and they made the microtransaction store in that game, and it was Activision that just kind of rubber stamped it, at least according to Jason Schreier. Not only that, the game was made in 16 months, which isn't a lot of time to make any kind of game, not to mention a huge AAA open worldy shooter MMO light kind of thing, which probably would completely explain why some people think it feels like a 1.5 rather than the Destiny 2 full proper sequel.
So when the reboot apparently happened, they'd already been working on it for more than 16 months, and then the new it was a game director who came on board in April, according to Schreier. They said, don't quote me on that, April 2016. And how much of a reboot was it? That's the question. Like, how much did they scrap, and how much did they run on with it, carry on with? Because 16 months doesn't seem like a long enough time to be able to put out a AAA game. And obviously, if they had the original there anyway, and Destiny 2, people saying that it is a 1.5, I mean, that's where you can point and say, well, they didn't put enough effort in. We're paying full price for this game. AAA game, you'd expect at least 3 years. I mean, obviously, it depends how much people are working on it, how much man hours has gone into it. We expect more for your money than 16 months of work.
I mean, it definitely does look and handle and play and everything like that like the original. And, it's okay, the graphics-wise, it's maybe a bit more vivid and colourful, but generally, it's the exact same game to look at. If you were to put it side for side, they look very similar. What's really interesting to me is that something kind of like this happened with Destiny 1 as well. Like, there was all these cutscenes and stuff that came out after the game came out. When the game released, the huge number one criticism was there's no story here. The story is terrible. The voice acting is rubbish. But there were these kind of cutscenes that leaked and stuff, and people saying, oh, there was this really big story, and all that was just removed, and for whatever reason. Then there was a big dramatic development thing for Destiny 1 as well. So it's happened again here. Yeah, and they've actually rebooted the game halfway through development. They've replaced the director with someone new, and he's had to put the game together in 16 months. Among the websites that have reported this story, they've approached Activision, whatever, and just there's been no response, no comment from Activision yet. So it's going to be interesting to see if they say anything, what they can say at all about this. It's very likely they'll just ignore it, to be honest, because maybe just addressing it will resurface the story. Do you know what I mean?
They're far too busy making them games, Mac. They're just too hard to make, aren't they? They're hard, they're expensive, and and all the other excuses that they want to throw at us. God, it's as if someone forced them into making games, isn't it? It's as if they're being forced to do that for a living. You can choose not to. How about that?
Destiny 2, there's another story, another dramatic story about the game. We've had loads of stuff already since the game's come out. What do you think of this? Let us know down below. Remember to like the video if you enjoyed it. Please do subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this every single day. There's another video right there which you can check out right now if you want. And the link to Patreon, of course, if you do want to support the channel. See you next time.